everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode. My name is Lucy Challenger, and I'm the CEO of Polo and Tweed. And today I am joined by Jane Skingley, painter and artist, as you can see from the fabulous painting behind her. Jane, hello, how are you?
Hi there, Lucy. Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me on this.
No, not at all. It's such a pleasure to have you join us. Now, I know from stalking you online that your artwork is so beautiful, is so unique, but I also know that you've had a really interesting career prior to becoming a professional artist. And I thought for all our listeners who've tuned in today, who haven't had a chance yet to see your incredible work and hear your story, perhaps you could tell us in your own words a little bit about your background and how you came to be a professional artist.
Yes, absolutely. I hope it's quite an inspiring story, actually. But I started off with a career in a London PR agency. I was the director of a London PR agency and had a pretty successful career there. And it wasn't until after I'd had my children, there's something amazing about having children that, I don't know, you've made these people that you can make anything. And I felt a huge urge to create. I used to go to a London art fair with my mother and my sister and loved every minute of it and thought it would be my absolute dream if I could earn a living painting and selling my art here. But at that stage, it was just a dream. But then I had my children and decided this huge urge to paint just sort of had to come out. So I was lucky enough to have a bit of space at home. So I kind of made it out like a studio and got all the material, and then went out to paint when my boys were off at the nursery. And the first day, I went out there, I had no doubts that I could do it. And at this point, I should confess that I have absolutely no qualifications in art. So I don't even have art GCSE. But I just sort of felt I could do it. And I started to paint, and my first paintings were terrible, absolutely terrible. But as time went on, I put more and more effort into it. And I actually also got a tutor. And I started to paint the sea. And I've been brought up by the sea. I brought up sailing. And I think there's something about connecting with the sea, connecting with your subject matter, that suddenly I thought, there's something here now. These paintings are quite good. And so I worked away at it. And I sold my first painting to my window cleaner. he was cleaning the windows and he kept saying, "Oh, that's lovely. How much is that?" I don't know, no idea. I haven't thought about it. And then eventually I sold him one of the paintings, didn't even cover the cost of cleaning my windows. But it made me think, gosh, if someone is prepared to spend their money on one of my paintings, perhaps more people are. So I put on an exhibition, invited everybody I knew, and sold everything. And then I invited a gallery who then came along and gave me a gallery deal. So then I had an outlet to start showing my work. And I've had some good luck. But that was the sort of launching of my career, really.
Wow, that's incredible.
I gave up my PR job, and I've been doing that ever since.
Wow, my gosh. I mean, it's quite interesting that you sort of said that the point of that change in your life was having your children and sort of feeling in your bones that this is something you wanted to do and that you loved. But coming from someone who, I can't draw. I did pottery at school. I can create things sort of on a sort of 3D perspective, but I literally could draw a stick man, and that's, pushing it at times, much to the horror of my 5-year-old, who's entirely unimpressed when I draw a very bad pig. He corrects me and says, "Mummy, that's not a pig." But, you mentioned that you didn't do GCSE art. So, yeah. I mean, where do you even begin? What was your beginning? Was it literally you bought the canvas, you bought the paints? I mean, how do you know what paints to buy? What did you start developing in the early stages of your process?
Well, I think, you do need some kind of education. So I kind of was a bit flippant about that. I did get a tutor. I didn't go to art college, and I didn't have sort of formal school art education beyond primary school. But I did get a tutor who was absolutely fantastic, and I had decided that I wanted to work with oil paints, which I love. They're kind of rich and buttery. And so obviously there is some technique. You can't, there's some rules that go around oil paints, and obviously he taught me those, but also rules can be broken. So that got me started, and I sort of believe if you're starting out in anything like this, you should paint what you love. Okay. So if you love horses, start off drawing horses, start off painting horses. You might evolve, you might become abstract over time. But I do believe it has to sort of connect and resonate sort of deeply with you. And for me, it's the sea and it's the countryside. So whenever I go to the coast, I just feel better. I feel calm. And I hope that I sort of transmit some of that tranquility in my paintings. That's my aim.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say about starting with something that you feel passionate about, because I think all art, for people listening in and for myself that might not physically create art, if you're interested in it, but if you're moved by something, you can't always put your finger on what evokes that feeling within you. But like you say, it's often situational, like the sea that you grew up around, and it makes you feel a certain way, and then it brings that art out of you. Have you ever had to in more recent years paint something that you don't feel emotionally connected with? Is that very difficult to do?
Yes, I suspect it is. I do commissions actually for people quite a bit, landscapes, and that can be more challenging because although the fundamentals are the same, there's sky, there's land, it might be a place that means an awful lot to that person, but it's not a place that I know. So I have to sort of work quite hard at teasing out of them what it is that they love about that place to try and capture a bit of that. But yes, I've never painted a horse. And actually for Christmas, for my sister, I painted a picture of her dog, a portrait of her dog for Christmas. And it was so hard. I mean, I can't tell you. She says she's thrilled with it, but so yeah, stick really to what you feel passionate about.
Yeah. And so with that commission process where you talk about perhaps painting a landscape that you're not familiar with, I assume, I know, I realise it might be hard in our current situation, but I assume part of your process is going to the place and experiencing it, or can you do it remotely? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, I do it from photographs a lot of the time, most of the time. Because some of the beaches I've painted, one in South Africa, I've got a beach in Bora Bora. People have these destinations where perhaps they went on a honeymoon or something, and then they decide they want to have a painting of that for their anniversary. And so they're not going to send me, sadly, to Bora Bora for a commission. So they send me photographs, and we work together, discussing it. And then I'll do some simple line drawings of the composition, and we'll agree sort of colours and things, whether it's going to be a warm feeling or a stormy feeling or whatever. And then I keep the client informed throughout the process. So I'll send them photos of the painting as it develops, or they can visit my studio in normal times. So there's no surprises along the way. And actually I had one I did of South Africa. When I sent them the photos halfway along, they said, well, this is absolutely beautiful, but what you have to realize is the sea of South Africa is absolutely freezing. It comes up from Antarctica and it's freezing. And I had made the sea look quite warm because I'd assumed it would be warm. So a little tweak of the color, and then we get something that we're both happy with.
Yeah, no, that I can imagine that's very important. And looking at your work, you've got the seascapes and the landscapes, which seem a lot of your artwork is focused around, and they are beautiful, but there's movement within them. They don't feel like a static image when I look with my untrained eye. I mean, is that a style that you've developed over the years, or were your paintings always having that sort of natural movement and life to them?
Yes, it is a style I've developed over the years. What I've sort of found is that by flicking paint at the canvas and then smoothing it in. There's something about the fact that the paint is moving when it hits the canvas. It's quite messy. I mean, I do quite heavy flicks. And then I smooth it in, and it gives this energy and movement to the clouds and the sea that I can't get just by meticulously trying to paint a cloud or paint the sea. And I love those random marks. You know, when you look closely at my paintings, they've got lots of these flicks and random marks in them, and some of them are so beautiful in their own right that I actually leave them. I don't smooth them in, and they kind of add to that feeling of energy. So yeah, it's an evolving technique, and one that has sort of become mine.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I think that's, I mean, when you look at up close at oil on canvas, there is that movement within the oil itself, you know, that sort of the ripple. It's not a flat surface. And I think you look at the greats to modern painters like yourself, you have that sense of life behind it, which you've brought with that dynamic, you know, flicking onto the paper, or onto the canvas, sorry. But I mean, and this is a question because I'm not a painter and I've never painted, as I said earlier, but do you ever get writer's block or the equivalent with painting? Do you ever get to a point where you have to stop and walk away? Will you have multiple paintings on the go at one point, or do you just do one and finish one? What is your process around that?
Yes, all those things actually. What you have to do, and it's the hardest thing I think as an artist, is knowing when to stop. So my sort of rule of thumb is when I feel like I'm not making it any better, I have to step away from the painting. It's really tempting to try and resolve it there and then, and you know, get the perfect painting. And I've been guilty of that. You know, you do something and then suddenly you've mucked it up. But with my seascapes, what I do is I work in multiples, so I've always got a number of paintings on the go at any one time, and I build up layers of paint, and I have to get the under layers of paint dry before I work on the next layers, so that if I do muck it up, I can wipe it off, and the previous layers are still there, if you like, they're dry. Whereas if you do it all in one go, it's sort of much higher stakes, really, because if you do something wrong, then you've got no alternative but to scrape the whole day's work off, which I have been known to do.
Oh my gosh, my heart drops at the thought of that entire creative process you've been through, then just being sort of erased. But I guess if you don't feel it's right, if you don't feel it's captured what was in your mind, that's inevitably what you would do. And so, you know, what is it about your profession that you think, that compared to your PR career, that makes you want to wake up every day and do it? What do you find particularly exciting about it?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's like playing, really, to me. You know, I absolutely love paint. I love mucking around with it, seeing what you can do with it, you know, getting your hands in it. Sometimes I get it, you know, I don't realize I'm so into it, it's all over my face. In fact, when I went and just did my hair before this, I had a great smear of paint over my face to wipe that off. But yeah, I mean, it's challenging. It is challenging being an artist. Every single mark you make is like a decision. You know, do you put it there? Do you put it there? Is it light or dark? So I think that challenge means that every day, every painting is different. And also, it's not just painting. I mean, probably a third of my time is spent, you know, at the desk, doing emails. You know, I've got a website, uploading stuff to the website, photographing stuff, responding, you know, Instagramming, you know, all this stuff. The idea that I'm just solely, you know, knee deep in paint, you know, there is a lot of admin that goes with it too. And actually, I quite enjoy that aspect to it, because I did previously have a life and business. So I quite like the balance of some admin and some marketing, and the challenge of running, you know, a mini business. So yeah, I think it's the variety as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, looking back at your career, and obviously you talked about taking on a tutor to support you and develop your techniques. How much emphasis do you put on the training that you had, and are you still learning? Do you still look to people you admire to give you guidance, or do you enroll on courses? I mean, how much are you still actively training, as it were?
All the time. I mean, I do go on courses when you can go on courses. I enrolled actually in a really scary course last year, but it got cancelled due to COVID, so I haven't done it yet. And the blurb on it says it's not for the faint-hearted. So I kind of think, oh God, I don't know whether I can cope with somebody sort of tearing my art practice to pieces. But I think you do have to put yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And there's just a wealth of stuff out there now. You can go onto YouTube and you can watch artists painting, Instagram stuff full of people, demonstrating techniques. I mean, it's almost information overload. But yes, absolutely evolving all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so exciting about anyone in the arts. There is that sense that you can continually learn and grow, and you don't ever really stop learning. I mean, my father-in-law is a professional drummer, and so he's in the music industry, and he has been ever since he was a young man. And whenever I visit, he's constantly, practicing his drums. He's sort of doing his little fiddle things on the dining room table, and there's this constant, he YouTubes the great drummers out there as well, even though he is literally one of them. And there is that sense that even in his late 70s or 60s or whatever age he is, he wants to learn, and I think that's so exciting about the art world, because you can just keep being creative, which is such a fabulous sort of place to be in. But like you say, also has its range of challenges, because you can get stuck and you have to know when to say no and walk on, which I hadn't really given much thought to before. But you mentioned that time, that you sort of have to scrape it all off and start again. Can you think of any, unusual or funny moments being an artist that you could share with us?
Well, I think it does sort of relate to that, actually. I had one day when I was painting something, and I did get to the end of the day and I did think, oh God, that's really horrible. Actually, it's really ugly. So one of the things I do is I pour terps, which is the spirit we use to thin our paint down and clean our brushes. I poured terps all over it, and then I left it flat on the floor in the studio, and just in case something magical had happened overnight. Anyway, I came in the next day and it was really beautiful. I was like, wow, that is amazing. It's never happened since. And it's not a way to build an artistic practice, but there was one random time when it worked.
Oh, that's amazing. The Terps fairy did something in the middle of the night of the painting. That's
magic.
Funny. Yeah, magic, exactly. So obviously we speak now, we're in another national lockdown, and last year the world changed, the world pandemic happened, and I know that you had a gallery which you then could, a studio, sorry, that you then couldn't access, and you sort of had to readjust everything. So how did you find that process with COVID? I mean, how did it affect you professionally and your work and your creative, juices from flowing on the canvas?
Well, initially, I mean, the first lockdown, it was pretty scary, actually. Obviously, we were told we couldn't come to our studio where I am now. There was some logistical stuff. I had to get my two sons back home from where they were and all sort of integrated back into the house. And then I had to move. I've got a shed at home that I used to paint in when I started. So I had to move all my studio stuff that I needed back to the shed. And then, all galleries and art fairs were shut. So I was facing no income, nowhere to show my work, and got myself into a bit of a panic about it. And initially I couldn't paint at all. I just couldn't do it. I think that, there was so much stuff going on that we were trying to take in and process, that the creative process just had to be put to one side. And then as time went on, an artist actually started a fantastic initiative called the Artist Support Pledge.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard about it, but anyway, it was a sort of sharing community where artists who normally, their work is normally bigger, more expensive, created small pieces of art for a maximum of £200. And then when you've sold £1,000 worth, you pledged to buy the work of another artist. Okay. So I took part in that, and I actually sold loads, and I also was able to buy quite a lot of art as part of the community. So that was a real boost initially, and then the creativity came back, and the little paintings that I created were all really moody. All my skies were so dark and moody, and you can see behind me that normally my colors are light and bright and, you know, calming, and these paintings were so sort of laden with turbulence, because I think it was reflecting the turbulence of the time. And you know, there were fantastic colors in them, but they were so sort of dark and energetic. You know, I look back on them now and think, wow, that was a pretty interesting time, you know, creatively. So yeah, it was, you know, it was pretty huge actually. And then this time I've been able to continue to come here, and it's felt much more like business as usual. There's been a bit of a boom actually in the art world, because a lot of people have been at home, and if they're lucky enough to still be in their jobs, they haven't got so many things to spend their money on. Perhaps they're not going on holiday, they're not going out, and they're thinking, well, let's make my, you know, my house as nice as it can be. So actually it has been pretty good. You know, in the end it's all worked out quite well.
Good. Well, I can imagine that during that turbulent time, as you said, that there's that maybe anxiety or concern for the future comes out in your work. I mean, like any artist, whether you write poems or create music, it's going to be reflective of your state of mind, which you know, I would love to see those turbulent paintings. They sound quite exciting.
I've done a little book on my website. You can see
lovely
them.
So the listeners must go and have a look at that afterwards. So if someone was listening to this and thinking, I would love to, you know, eventually give up the day job and be a full-time artist, what would be some words of wisdom you could share with them?
So I would say the top tip is to show up every day. I think people sort of think slightly that as an artist, you know, you only paint when the fancy takes you, you know, but actually you need to put the hours in. Like any author you hear, they say that they have a structured day, a structured routine. They go to wherever they're going to work, they shut the door, they work for a certain number of hours, you know, and I do the same right from the very beginning. When my boys were little, I would drop them at school, I'd come back home, make a coffee, go out to my studio, work, then, you know, close the door, go and pick them up or whatever. And so I do think putting in the time is really important, and building up a practice. I think being, you know, the administration side of it as well can't be emphasized enough. You know, you have to be organized about it. You probably got to have a website in this day and age, and the art world has never been more open. There's so many opportunities for artists nowadays. There's online platforms that you can sell, you can do it yourself via Instagram. You know, in the old days you couldn't actually be a successful artist unless you got a gallery or a number of galleries to back you, and I would say that's not the case anymore. You can do it on your own terms, you can do it in your own way. You can, with social media, you can reach people, you know, through Facebook or your chosen, you know, or YouTube or whatever, probably even TikTok nowadays. You know, so I think I think there are great opportunities for artists actually. And also another thing, join your local open studios. So all around the country there are organizations where artists open their studios to the public different times of the year. In Berkshire, ours is in May. And it's a fantastic organization. They have websites and directories, and I've had so many brilliant opportunities through our local open studios, so I wholeheartedly support that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know about that. That's really interesting.
It's a brilliant thing. I mean, you can go around and visit artist studios, and you know, if you like sculpture, you can see sculptors making, or jewelry, or painters, and you go and get insights into how they make it. It's brilliant.
Wow, that is fascinating. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the word time and that sort of regularity to the craft, because I think so often with the arts you see the end result and you forget the amount of time it takes to create it, because you see the tip of the iceberg, you see the beautiful finished painting, but you don't realize particularly how long it's taken to develop that. So I know that this would be not an exact figure, but how many hours do you think it takes to create one of your final pieces? And I'm sure that varies depending on size, etc. But what would you say on average the amount of hours goes into a painting?
I don't know. It's quite random, because sometimes a painting just comes together really quickly, and then, and that's just a lucky one. And sometimes it is, I don't know, it just won't come right for a long time. But each one takes a number of weeks. But I don't only work on one painting at a time. So I've got all sorts of paintings and all sorts of different sort of stages. And if I'm struggling with one, I'll put it to one side and do something on another one. But yeah, I mean, a number of weeks, but not full time.
No,
that answers the question. It is very hard to quantify it.
It's difficult, but like you say, your process of having the multiple ones allows you to dip in and dip out, and therefore hard to quantify in essence an exact time scale for one painting. So you mentioned your boys, and children love to paint. I see it with my little one. He gets so excited by the paint, be it on his hands or possibly all across the floor. Do your children get involved? And my second question would be, with the fact that we're all homeschooling at the moment, are there any fun painting activities that you've done with your boys that sort of got them involved? Is there anything you could share with us?
So many painting activities. I could do you a whole podcast on painting activities, but I'll give you one which is quite fun with young children. It's actually making paint from scratch. So paint is basically pigment, which is the color bit, and some kind of medium, which is the bit that binds it all together. And in the old days, they used to use egg tempera was a type of paint. So you can use an egg as your binder, and then you can go out with your child into the garden and find things that might make the pigment. So for example, maybe you could find a bit of ash or coal or something, maybe if you've got a fire or a barbecue. You can find, you can grind up little bits of soil, see what color that makes, leaves, petals, fruit, berries, blueberries, strawberries. Even go into the spice cupboard, see what you've got. Turmeric's a color, and then have fun. It's almost like cooking. You try different things and then make marks on your piece of paper saying, write little notes by it saying this was, grass and egg or whatever. And it's just quite fun, because sometimes you get unexpected colors, and some things you think might be a really good color, turn out to be like grass actually is rubbish, and it ends up being sort of brown. But it's quite a fun thing to do.
I love that. That's such a clever idea. I had no idea, of course, how paint was made. I just thought you went down to B&Q and picked up a tin. But of course, it's made from natural things, as with our medicine. Everything comes from some original state, and kids would absolutely love that. I think you mentioned about that turmoil in your paintings earlier, that when we went through COVID you saw coming out, and I think a lot of the world has faced financial hardships. They faced mental health issues and challenges with this entire bizarre new world that we've had to come to grips with. What helped you get through the depth of that? Were there things that you put in place to help with your routine that made you feel more grounded and cope better?
I think getting outside every day is so important, and really looking at the world around you. And it's very much an artist's trait, but be like an artist, look at the world like an artist, because artists sort of tend to notice things and see things. And in our busy world, we're all rushing around, we're all guilty of it. We're looking at things, but we're not really seeing them. We're not really seeing how the light is falling on that line of fields, or the colors in that cloud up there. We're just rushing around. And if you can use this time, we have all this amazing time on our hands that we don't normally have, use a little bit of that time just to look a little bit more at the world around you and appreciate it. Even if you live in a city, the way the light falls on a building or casts shadows on the ground.
Mm.
There's so much richness out there to look at and appreciate, and I think that
Yeah, no, I love
is a
that.
joy.
I often do that actually when I used to be, not at the moment, walking around towns. You often don't look up, and the second you stop and you look up at architecture, you suddenly realize some incredibly beautiful things of buildings that you have never ever noticed, even though you've walked past that building, for maybe years on end. And I think it's so true that we see everything all the time, but we don't actually see it. And I think there's a lot to be said for, even if you're not a professional artist, to stopping and taking that moment and seeing really what's out there. I think it is definitely grounding and gives you a sense of peace, I hope.
No, definitely appreciating the world, because it is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, Jane, we're going to move into a quick fire question round. You haven't prepared for this, you don't know it's coming. So I'm going to say 2 words. Pick the word that you feel most drawn to. You can give me a reason as to why, if you wish, or you can just say the word. So you can explain to me, or you don't have to. So for example, I might say cats or dogs, and you would say
dog, because we have a dog.
Okay, right. Morning or night?
Morning.
Vacation or staycation?
Well, right now, vacation.
Netflix or party?
Oh, I could do with the party. But I quite like both.
Fish or chips?
Can I have both?
Yeah. Monet or Van Gogh?
Oh, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. Monet probably, but I really want both. I'm actually going to be greedy probably with all of them.
Rain or sun?
Sun.
Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie?
Oh, Brad.
Yeah. Landscapes or seascapes?
Both. No, seascapes are in my heart.
Yeah. Fast or slow?
That's a really tricky one, actually. I'd like to think slow, but I think I'm probably fast.
Sea or swimming pool?
Sea.
Sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
Eggs or bacon?
Neither of them. I don't really like either of them. Well, I mean, I do like bacon, but I don't eat it.
Fair enough. Sting or Prince?
Sting.
Gold or silver?
Gold.
Today or tomorrow?
Today.
Nice.
Got to
Thank
be
you.
today.
So Jane, I think this has been a lovely insight into the world of art. And I think for people listening who otherwise haven't yet experienced creating something artistically, like you said with your first journey into it, you just went and you just did it. And I think particularly nowadays, there is a lot to be said for just, getting on and having a go and seeing what happens with it. But, looking back over your career from PR then into doing all of this incredible art, what do you believe that it takes to succeed in life? What is the meaning of life all about?
I think it's a bit boring, but I do think hard work. I really do. That old saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get, it is very true. And I have worked incredibly hard to, from a point of zero as an artist to earning my living doing it. But I think it doesn't feel like work. I think that's probably the thing. If you really love it, I mean, your job probably doesn't feel like work a lot of the time, because you really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so that is my sort of key thing, I would say to people.
Yeah, find what you love and then just keep
find what you love, and then it won't be like work.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Now, for everyone who's been listening in and needs to now go and see Jane's incredible, beautiful art, maybe commission her for something or buy something from her, you can go to her website, which is janeskingley.com. You can find her on Instagram, of course, and drop her a DM directly if you've got any questions about her art. Her handle is jane.skingley. And then she is, of course, on Facebook if you're not on Instagram, and her handle is janeskingley.artist. But you can reach her at her website. You can drop us a message if you have any questions, but please do go and have a look at her incredible art. It is beautiful. And Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.